screen. I'm Anton, here with my co-host Shelby. We're here to discuss a variety of topics from across the sustainability universe. Shelby, what's up?
I'm doing well. I think you're looking like a beach boy today with your
A little
outfit.
bit.
I like this top.
I'm trying to manifest summer, I guess.
Yeah, whereas I'm over here in my sweater, but it was thrifted, so that's a good thing.
I mean, that Texas climate probably's got you all messed up. You're not acclimated for Ohio.
That's true. It's been almost 2 years, but 5 years in Austin really threw me off. But it's getting warmer here. I've been enjoying some time outside. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Been doing some birding. What else have I doing? A little bit of gardening. Yeah.
Okay, great. We heard on Tuesday about your stinky tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was your neighbors. I don't want to blame you for having that.
It wasn't mine. I would cut it down if I saw it in my yard.
Yeah.
And I'm tempted to cut down my neighbors too, but.
I don't have any of my own personal trees because I live in an apartment, but I do live really close to the national park. So I've been going on a lot of walks, taking my binoculars, trying to take a page out of your book and do a little bit of birding myself.
Nice.
I did see a tiny little screech owl up in its little burrow recently. And
That's
that felt
awesome.
pretty good.
Yeah, I was actually sitting at a coffee shop the other day, and I heard a ruby-crowned kinglet. It's like a really tiny bird with like a blazing red mohawk. It's like kind of a funny-looking bird, but it's really cute.
I can't wait to be able to know birds by their sounds enough to do what you just did.
It's kind of a fun superpower. It's kind of useless, but fun. Yeah.
I can't wait to learn more from it.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to that too. So, Shelby, have you been reading any good books lately?
Always, and probably too many. I think I'll just stick with one right now, which at least to tell you about, which is Food Politics by Marion Nestle. We talked about food in our last episode, how we choose to eat, methane emissions, all that jazz. So this book is almost 20 years old, although this is an updated copy, and I got to see the writer, Marion Nestle. She's a public health nutritionist, and she teaches at NYU. And she spoke at World Food Day last year, and she talked all about the different ways that lobbyists and big dairy, big meat, like all of these big industry groups impact the way that we advise people to eat food. It's just it's been interesting to be reading that alongside the conversation we had last week. Both the conversation about how we eat, and then also conversations about like the showing both sides of an argument. We talked about that in relation to climate change, and she's essentially talking about that here. So that's been a great sort of crossover between my environmental and food interests this week.
I definitely need to put that on the list, but I wanted to get into our first article.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about development, on development with a fun last segment, but I wanted to first start off with the zombie that is single-family zoning. So, do you know about single-family homes? Are you looking at homes? Do you know about homes?
I'm learning a lot more than I ever wanted to because I'm trying to buy my own home right now. My understanding of single-family homes comes more from an environmental justice and sort of public health background, in the sense of single-family zoning keeping folks who maybe would be able to find housing more attainable if it were multifamily.
Yes.
That's my background with it, but tell me more about how you're approaching this.
Yeah. So I'm kind of approaching this from like a sustainability aspect. I think people should live in the homes that exist today. Obviously, homes can last many decades. I live in a 1944 brick house. The continuation of building more housing developments, though, it's a little bit unsustainable. Not only are we creating a lot of fossil fuels with the production of wood, we're cutting down trees, we're doing all these things. We're also destroying wetlands, we're destroying ecosystems, just so people can live in a brand new McMansion type home. And there's nothing inherently wrong with living in a nice home or having nice things. But the experts are also telling us that we need to think about the way that we use land. Municipalities have to take into account the way that cities plan developments, the way that people are living in spaces, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is the idea that, sure, if there are single-family homes that already exist, the greenest thing we can do is use those homes, but also when we're making new things, like making them mixed use or making it be able to house more people with fewer resources, like less land or fewer like construction resources. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what I'm saying, yeah. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having nice things. I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the drawbacks of building brand new housing developments.
Yeah, tell me all about it, because I feel like all I'm hearing is just, oh, the housing stock is so low and competition's so high, and I feel that when I'm
Yeah.
trying to purchase homes, because people are coming in with cash bids
Yeah.
that are over asking price and making it really hard to purchase, but then I look around and see that we live here in Cleveland or in Northeast Ohio, where
Yeah.
we've had a loss of population in many ways, so how do we square those things? I mean, what's your perspective on that and how that goes back to this environmental
Yeah.
lens on it?
Absolutely. I think we should take more of a lead on countries that have done a great job at some denser living spaces. And this could still look like cluster homes. Like if you're going to build single family living, you can build houses that are maybe closer together and still have a large backyard with like a preservation area
Yeah.
behind the development, instead of clear cutting a bunch of trees and trying to cram in as many homes as you possibly can on that plot of land. You're increasing impervious surface, which for people who aren't in the stormwater lingo, that's just like anything water touches that it doesn't penetrate through. So dirt that is pervious, concrete impervious, a roof also impervious, right? So you're going to have a lot of runoff into waterways that kind of overwhelms, erodes some of our waterways, but also takes a toll on our 100-year-old infrastructure in Cleveland.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, when I lived in South Korea after college, people really did live, or at least more people that I saw in my limited time there, more people lived in apartments or multifamily units. Even people who were very successful and made plenty of money. It was just, Korea's really mountainous. It's a country that's about the size of Indiana, but about 70% of it is covered in mountainous terrain. So there's only a little bit of land that you can really build on, and so yeah, you definitely build up, and it seems like the US has a lot of land, and so we tend to build out, but then what happens to that land that maybe could be used for, I don't know, agriculture, or just like left the way it is, or like enjoyed as a park?
I mean, one of the biggest reasons why we're losing so many different species is because they lack habitat connectivity. So when we're just going in and clear cutting parcels of land, we're going to start losing more species. We've lost the bobwhite, the northern bobwhite, one of my favorite birds. It kind of
sorry, R.I.P.
runs around on the ground. It's not extinct yet, but it's definitely not in Northeast Ohio anymore.
I see. Well,
So
rest in peace somewhere that's not up
yeah,
here.
I have to go all the way to like Dayton to see one. So
Oh, I gotcha.
it's affecting my birding, Shelby.
I know, this is really personal. We're joking, but it is personal in the sense of like, when we're building out without thinking about who's gonna be able to access it, it becomes an issue both in terms of like the land that we're using, but also in terms of who is able to buy there, and whether housing is affordable for people.
Yeah.
So it's like anything, kind of multi-layered and intersectional.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to just throw a couple more things at you before we wrap this up. One of the rules in Ohio is when a developer is building on a wetland, they don't actually have to protect. They don't have to actually restore wetlands elsewhere. So if you're losing that wetland, it's not a rule that you have to build new wetlands. I think it should be the rule, but one of the loopholes is you can actually just pay to protect another wetland that currently exists. So that's still a net loss of wetlands. Yes, you're paying to protect a wetland, but you had 2 wetlands before, now you're just down to 1 wetland. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it reminds me of the whole carbon offsetting thing, where it's like, oh, you're on a plane, but we purchased carbon offsetting by protecting this thing that was already a state park. So really, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of ding 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 greenwashing.
Yeah, greenwashing alert.
Greenwashing alert.
Yeah. So, and also on top of that, the infrastructure that is created, those gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, electricity, roads, that's all things that need to be kept up with in the long term. So cities are actually kind of digging themselves into an unsustainable hole by having to take care of all this infrastructure in the long term. A lot of municipalities, they're tempted to increase their tax base by building these housing developments. In the long term though, it's really not sustainable. And we know that by the studies done by urban studies professionals.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, you'll be happy to know that most of the houses I'm looking at are very old homes. I think they have a lot of character and charm.
I think that's the best part.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the environmental impact, but yeah, I'd like to live in an older home. And now, knowing that you have an older home, maybe you can help me manage all of the quirks that comes with that too
there's
when
plenty.
it finally happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of going on a theme here.
Yeah.
So we went from talking about where people live in terms of the actual building that they live in. Now I want to talk about where people live in terms of geographically, where in the world do they live.
Yeah, that sounds great.
This was sparked by two different resources, or sources I should say, that came out in the last week-ish. So one was from a podcast from the New Republic called The Politics of Everything, where they were talking about climate-proof cities. And then my partner is a die-hard reader of The Economist, and as I was telling him about doing this story on climate-proof cities, he was like, well, I'm reading this thing that's about how we're hitting like record highs in India and Pakistan and other places in Southeast Asia. So I've kind of squished those together to talk about the impact, disparate impact of climate change and global warming on different communities and what it might be doing to our migration patterns. So have you heard that term climate-proof city before?
I've never heard about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's a little bit made up, but the idea of a climate-proof city is that they're climate havens or destinations. They're in places that avoid the worst of the effects of natural disasters, so things like flooding, forest fires, tornadoes, and they would be able to hold a larger population. So most of the cities that are considered climate-proof are in the Midwest and the Northeast. Ohio cities are on that list because of our access to fresh water. Weirdly, Orlando, Florida also made the cut, but that was more about...
Really?
I know, shocking, right? I don't think of Florida as like a place that's super climate-proof, but they were considering it that way because the city itself is taking all of these steps to sort of greenify.
That's good.
But specifically, I want to talk about Duluth, Minnesota. Ever been?
Actually, yes. I drove through there on a birding trip to see the great gray owls in Zaxton Bog.
Wow, how was your experience in Duluth?
I mean, it wasn't all that, I don't know. Never mind. It was great. Yeah, it was great.
Well, it's certainly not a place. I don't think we want to sit here and talk badly about Duluth.
No,
I've never been there, and you clearly got to see some great birds. But it's not exactly a place that you hear people talking about wanting to go on vacation. It's not Miami, New York, Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But people are kind of moving there because it was named as one of these climate-proof cities. It's a place that's already really, really cold, and so when the world gets hotter, it's not going to be somewhere like where I lived in Austin, Texas, where when it gets hotter, it's already unbearable and it just gets worse. It means you're going to have a lovely summer and maybe a slightly less dramatic winter than people in Duluth are used to. And a journalist from the New Republic went and talked to people who had recently moved to Duluth and asked them, why did you do this? And a lot of them said it was because of climate change. They wanted to move to... Have you ever even thought about this? I mean, you're from Northeast Ohio, which is already kind of a climate haven, but is it something that's come up for you before?
It's come up. I've heard about that. I'm just so surprised that people would move to a smallish town like Duluth, Minnesota, just to escape climate change. I mean, it must really feel real to them, especially maybe people in the South who have really hot summers.
Oh yeah, I can tell you that I definitely thought about it. I mean, I was excited to move to the North when I left Texas. Yeah. It's been interesting to see the cities that are embracing it versus the ones that aren't. Duluth is considered a very friendly place, Minnesota nice. So they're not exactly trying to keep people out, but they're not actively talking about, oh, move here. Whereas like Buffalo, New York is.
Oh.
They are using their place on the climate-proof cities list to say, come on out. I mean, we've got a shrinking population and
really
plenty of resources.
I mean, I kind of see that a little bit with Cuyahoga County, our new county executive here in the Cleveland area. He seems to really want to be the green city on the Great Green city on a blue lake.
Green city on a blue lake.
Yeah.
A great blue lake.
A great lake that's blue.
That's right. Yeah, so Cleveland could totally apply for this. We definitely have access to a lot of natural resources. It's a place that's naturally relatively cold, although this last winter, I have to say, was pretty warm.
Yeah.
But let's talk about kind of the flip side of this. So we've already referenced Texas as a place I've lived that was too hot for me. But that's really not the place that's experiencing the worst of it. I want to talk about what I read in The Economist. First, do you know what I'm talking about when I mention a wet bulb measurement or a wet bulb temperature?
No, I don't.
This will be key to understanding this story. So
Okay.
when we talk about a wet bulb measurement, it's the temperature plus the humidity. So essentially thinking about the fact that, we'll say Arizona's a dry heat, New Mexico is a
Yeah,
dry heat.
I understand that, yeah.
That's a real thing. Humidity makes it feel worse.
Yes.
And so when you hit, the human body sits at around 37 degrees Celsius. Apologies that all of these are in Celsius. The Economist is a British publication. The human body sits at around 37 degrees Celsius. So when you have these wet bulb measurements of temperatures that are starting to approach the level of the human body, essentially because there's so much humidity in the air and it's so hot, our body's natural protection against heat is to sweat.
Right.
The reason it cools us off is that sweat then evaporates into the air and it leaves behind this sensation of cooling.
Okay, I think I understand where this is going.
When it's that humid and that hot, as you sweat, it has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And so it becomes really dangerous. So I want to talk about the impact of that on cities that are exactly the opposite of climate proof. So it's considered to be potentially fatal if you're at a wet bulb temperature of over 35 degrees Celsius. Remember, our bodies are 37, so that's just when it approaches. A city in Pakistan peaked at 51 degrees Celsius. 51
That's
degrees Celsius.
Much higher than 35.
Much higher than 35. When we put that in context, it's 123 degrees Fahrenheit
Yeah.
for that wet bulb measurement. And in South Asia, we saw 110,000 heat-related excess deaths between 2000 and 2019. In the country of India, over 75% of people work in the heat, and those jobs that are working in the heat contribute to over 50% of India's gross domestic product. So when we think about the sort of flip side of these great climate-proof cities, places people want to live because they're cool, because you're not dealing with these excess heat, it's also like a real issue in places that are hot.
Yeah.
My experience in Texas was that it was just unpleasant to be outside, and I worked in an office. Have you spent any time in the South or places that are quite hot like that?
I've been to like Oklahoma and maybe like just in the northern part of Texas, but never so far south that maybe it was unbearable.
Yeah. Do you ever work outside for your job or anything like that?
I do some stuff in the field, some testing of harmful chemicals.
Sure.
But I'm also a homeowner, so I definitely know what it's like to do some manual labor outside.
Yeah.
Maybe not for 8 hours a day though.
And just imagine doing that, but it's 123 degrees outside.
I couldn't. I would probably just sit and wallow in my air conditioning, playing video games.
Yes. So I think this brings up for me the idea that people want to live in places that are going to be resilient to climate change, but not everybody has access to be able to pick up and move to Duluth. So if you are a laborer who's working outside in India, I'm sure you probably would like to live somewhere that's cooler, or at least not have to labor outside like that when it's that hot. It's potentially dangerous for you, it's a danger for their economy, but you can't really just pick up and move in the same way.
Yeah, 100%. That's scary stuff.
It's scary stuff, but I think we have sort of a fun story to end on. We've talked about where people live in their homes, where people live in the world, and that impact or experience in the context of climate change. But let's talk about something more fun.
Yeah, so this actually came from one of our producers, Nick. He brought up that there's a video game that actually is talking about the reverse of SimCity. Instead of building a city, you are rewilding an area that was maybe once contaminated. So I know that we both got a chance to play through the first level, if you will.
Oh yeah.
I was curious what your thoughts were.
Well, the game is called Terra Nil. At least I think that's how I'm supposed to pronounce it.
I'd say so.
And I thought it was so fun. It's sort of like a relaxing puzzle style game.
Yeah, it's a little puzzly.
Yeah, I've never played SimCity.
Yeah.
I remember playing like Roller Coaster Tycoon or Lemonade Stand
Yep.
Tycoon when I was in school.
I didn't know they had a lemonade stand tycoon.
Oh yeah, you wanted to build up that lemonade stand. So to me, this felt really similar in that your goal was like to build something up, but
Yeah.
instead of building up a built environment, we were rebuilding a natural environment.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved that there was enough demand in the world for someone to be able to put this out and
Yeah.
have like 4.5 stars out of 5 on all of their reviews. And also it was just really pleasant to say, oh, okay, well my next task is going to be making sure that there are pollinators in this world. I loved that.
Yeah, I love that. Once you've restored the land to a workable state where plants can grow, I love that you can even start looking for fauna that have relocated to your area because you've restored it to its natural beauty.
Yes, I found frogs and I found ducks and I found deer.
Yes.
And they did a great job animating those so that you can zoom in
Yeah.
and sort of see how cute they are. But it sounded like it was really, I'm not an expert, but it sounded like it was really based on some methods that are used in the real world. You
Yeah.
had to think about having an energy source and then you had to think about cleaning up after yourself. So if you
Yes.
put up a wind turbine in this fake world so that you could then power the materials you needed to do the prep work on the land.
Yeah.
Then you also had to have like a little guy come by and recycle that wind turbine once
Yep.
the land was rewilded.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was really fun after completing the first level. It was like you could just watch your land. There was like a continue button or an appreciate button.
Yes!
And I was like, yeah, I'll just take a minute to appreciate all the hard work I did on this world. So
I liked the framing of that. It made you feel guilty. It was like a nudge to say, yeah, you should step back and appreciate
Yeah,
this.
I know.
I felt like the next button should have said like, no, just go outside.
yeah, right, I know. So yeah, I thought that was a really fun game. I'm looking forward to getting our Twitch stream up and running so we can game more often.
I don't know about that, but I was. But
I'm pushing for it.
We'll certainly share the link to it. I downloaded mine on Steam on
Yeah.
PC, and it was a really enjoyable game to play.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelby, for talking with me about all things green. Could you let our viewers know how they can stay in touch with us?
Of course. If you'd like to stay connected to us, please be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at One Planet Media. That's ONE1. And if you'd like to rewatch full episodes, check out our YouTube channel, oneplanetmedia.com.
You can find all of our sources from today's episode in our show notes, which will be also posted on our website, oneplanetmedia.com.
We'll be back at the same time next week to bring you more news. Thank you for being a part of the global sustainability movement.